The WNBA Gambling Podcast on the Sports Gaming Podcast Network is brought to you by Onyx Fantasies. On the promo code NBA SGPN to score up to $1,000 in bonus cash. A reminder, use the promo code NBA SGPN to score up to $1,000 in bonus cash. We're also brought to you by Rhythm. Get your 7 free trial today by going to sportscampus.com, rhythmsportscampus.com, RITHMM. And welcome, everybody, to another episode of the WNBA Gambling Podcast here on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. I'm your host of this episode, Scott Reichel, going solo for this pod. Terrell was busy, but I did promise that we'd get an episode in this weekend, so I am going to do an episode for the Sunday games taking place. So once again, a reminder that there are only 2 games on the card, and we're going to go through them relatively quickly. I do want to recap what happened, though, in the last episode, and also recapping what happened over the weekend, particularly with the Saturday games. Before we get into any of that, do want to take care of some housekeeping. I want to remind people once again that you can definitely find some great deals on the SGPN merch store, because if you use the promo code football, you get 10% off everything in the merch store. So you want to get yourself some WNBA Gambling Podcast merchandise, some NBA Gambling Podcast merchandise, or if you want to just get some, for example, SGPN merchandise, definitely can get all that. And you can also get a good discount at checkout if you use the code football. You'll get 10% off on that. Plus, a reminder, college football did officially start this weekend. Tune into the Sports Gambling Podcast and the College Football Experience for Week 0 picks and for Week 1 picks coming up next week, as well as your favorite futures. Starting off with the actual recap of the last episode. For the actual lock and dog picks, I know what my picks were. As for Terrell, I know he won the lock, so that much I know. I forgot what his dog was, but for the actual recap, I ended up splitting. Did hit the dog, though. Ended up losing the lock with Chelsea Gray. Had the over 4.5 assists at about minus 135. Didn't get there, as she had 2 in the first half, then had 1 in the third quarter, and then had a pretty weird moment where she got benched for a decent portion of the fourth quarter, then ended up checking in, but it was too little too late at that point. So picked up a loss there with the Gray assists, but I did hit the dog, though. I had Tina Charles over 11.5 rebounds at plus 260. That got there. She ended up having 13 rebounds against the Mercury. Insane line, considering the fact that she flew over that number in the previous meeting. That immediate rematch, and we saw Charles easily get to 12 in that one. So overall, once again, ended up splitting the lock and dog picks, but hit the plus 260, so can't complain there. As for Terrell, I know Terrell ended up hitting the lock on the show, as I believe he ended up having the under in that Mystics game against the Sparks. I'm trying to remember what the actual dog was for him. I can't remember. Point is, though, we ended up winning one of the locks, and I hit my dog. So definitely a pretty solid episode. Hopefully we'll end up sweeping the episode here for the Sunday games. Nothing else to really talk about for the actual games on Friday. Trying to think of if there's anything worth talking about. You had 3 competitive games, 1 wasn't. The Mercury got revenge. They were able to beat the Dream by 2. Connecticut played with their food again, but they eventually got the job done, as Alyssa Thomas almost had a triple-double, but she did win the game with the 2 free throws at the end. You saw Washington get the job done, and they covered against the Sparks with the hook, as they were laying 5.5. They won by 6, and the Lynx did end up beating the Aces again, as they won that game by 13 points at home. As for the games that took place on Saturday, you had 2 games. You had the Sun on a back-to-back against the Liberty, and you had the Lynx on a back-to-back at home against the Fever. That was actually Maya Moore night, as they officially retired her jersey. And usually in the WNBA, you kind of fade the teams out of the rest disadvantage. You fade the teams that are playing back-to-backs. That did not work out at all on Saturday, because both teams that played the day prior won. The Sun, who never beat the Liberty, eventually beat the Liberty, but it was kind of a weird spot, because it was the game where nobody thought they'd actually do it. So maybe the expectations were kind of low for them, and they were not really in their own heads. And you saw the Sun come out loose, came out focused, and they ended up getting the job done by 8 in New York. Very good win there for the Sun. For the late game, you saw the Lynx get the job done against the Fever. It was a 1-point game at half. Then it was about a 3-point game with about 5.5 to go. And then the Lynx won on a run, as they ended up closing the game on a pretty solid, I'd say, overall run based on how many 3-pointers they made down the stretch. And you saw the Lynx get the job done there, 90-80. So a nice job by the 2 teams that are probably going to finish top 4 in the standings, just based on how well they have played for the entire year. But after the Sun ended up almost losing to the Sky, I'm sure we all thought that they were going to lose to the Liberty, especially with the rest disadvantage having to travel. And that didn't happen. The Sun looked great. So if I had to power rank the performances, I would give the Sun the number 1 spot, and then I'd give the Lynx the 2 spot. But the point is, the Sun and the Lynx did what they had to do. And now we have a pretty fun battle for the standings, because right now the Sun are half a game ahead of the Lynx, because they've played an extra game. Now, I do think the main takeaways I have to mention in general from this past weekend, first of all, I got to mention the Lynx. because the Lynx have looked incredible, and I have to give them credit because they've won 6 straight. They're undefeated since the Olympics, and they have been destroying teams. It's not just one thing to beat the Aces. It's another thing to beat the Aces in back-to-back games, which is pretty rare. You don't see teams usually do that. Usually you expect kind of a split there, and we're not used to seeing the Aces lose any games, let alone a couple games in a row. But the Lynx are legit. I know that I've talked about it before on the show, and I'm going to mention it one more time. This is definitely a title contending team. We saw them win the Commissioner's Cup earlier this year as they beat the Liberty in the final there. Point is, though, the Lynx are 13-3 at home, and they have been really just dominant up to this point. So we'll see how they do moving forward. But right now they're in first place in the Western Conference. But if you're talking about teams that I think have the makeup to go the entire way, I think the Lynx can do it. Now, the argument that you're going to have to talk about is the other side of the coin. If I'm high on the Lynx, where does that leave the Aces? Because right now, I think we all know the Liberty are a serious title contender, and I can't really ignore that. They made the finals last year, and we'll see when they get healthy again with Lainey Hamilton. They should be definitely a serious candidate to win the title. Connecticut, no offense, despite beating the Liberty, I don't think any of us actually take them seriously when it comes to winning the championship because they beat the Liberty one time. They still lose to the Aces all the time, still lose to the Liberty most of the time. And I do think if you were asking me who I'd pick in a series between the Sun and the Lynx, I'd probably take the Lynx if I had to pick, just out of those two teams in a 3 out of 5 or 2 out of 3. I would take Minnesota. So that's going to lead the Aces because I know the Aces have you can't really dismiss the Aces because they've won 2 straight championships, but it's going to kind of open up an interesting conversation. And I know that Terrell's not here. I did ask him about the Chelsea Gray situation last episode, and he ended up saying that he wasn't too concerned. I know that Chelsea Gray is one of Terrell's favorite players. I got to bring it up because right now her post-injury is a shell of what she was pre-injury. And yes, you can make the argument that maybe it's just the first year after. She'll rehab it a bit more during the offseason. Maybe she'll get more in shape and she'll be able to figure it out. I'm just saying right now, Chelsea Gray with this team has been really just a marriage made in hell for this entire season. I don't see it. And I can recognize it because I ended up taking Chelsea Gray to go over on her assists for the lock last episode. So I was watching it pretty closely. Chelsea Gray just does not fit with this team right now. And you can make the argument that maybe it's because of the injury. The quickness just seems to be completely gone. And that's kind of going to segue into the Aces' real problem, which is their defense. And Gray has been, I don't want to say a traffic cone, but it's been pretty ugly to watch her guard on the perimeter for the entire season. And she got killed by Minnesota. It was so bad that I feel like the interesting rotations that Becky Hammon was using with Gray in that fourth quarter was kind of symbolic of how bad her defense actually is and how Becky Hammon feels the need to maybe trying to use a couple different lineups that involve Gray on the bench in crunch time. But it just seemed like Chelsea Gray, who we know is probably definitely a top 10 player in the league when healthy, this year, not so much. And I'm not sure if that's a one-off based on her coming back from injury or if this is maybe who she's going to be for the rest of her career. We've seen injuries, I'd say, zap away athleticism from players in other sports before. I don't think it's very different in this case, but I hope that's not the case because Chelsea Gray is a lot of fun. But if Chelsea Gray is going to play like this for the rest of the season, I can't pick the Aces to win the championship. I just can't do it. I don't think they're good enough. And yes, you can make the argument that A'ja Wilson's still A'ja Wilson. I get it, even though Collier killed her in back-to-back games over the weekend. But Jackie Young's been fine. Kelsey Plum's been okay too. But it just felt like Chelsea Gray was kind of the glue that kept the team together. And with her not being at the same level that she used to be at, I can't view the Aces the same way. And I feel like it is pretty, I'd say, accurate to assume or to connect the dots and to say that Chelsea Gray's deterioration kind of coincides with the Aces record being so underwhelming based on previous years or in comparison to recent years. So that was my main takeaway, is that I originally, when I talked to Terrell about the panic meter with Chelsea Gray 1 to 10, he was pretty relaxed about it. I think I always held like a 6 out of 10, 10 being the most panicked, 1 being not panicked at all. I'm bumping it up to like an 8 or a 9. I think the serious problem. And I think that Chelsea Gray, it's kind of an interesting spot because do you bench her? Do you put her with the second unit? I don't know, but with the starters right now, it's not working. And I feel like that was one main takeaway that I had against the Lynx. They killed her in the pick and roll, and she could do absolutely nothing about it. So that was my main thought from that overall matchup, my main overall takeaway from the weekend. The Aces, it's not fluky that they're losing some games, and I think it kind of connects back to Chelsea Gray. That was my thoughts there, so we'll see what happens moving forward. But let me know if you agree in the comment section, either after the video or if you're in the live stream right now. Am I wrong here? I feel like watching Chelsea Gray, it seems like they're expecting her to turn the clock back and to kind of become the player that she used to be. And I just don't see that version walking through the door. And I feel like that's going to be a serious problem for this team in the future. So either way, point is the Aces had a really bad weekend. The Lynx had a very good weekend. And when it comes to title contenders, you could argue the Aces are still in the conversation because of the history. So you're not going to officially dismiss them. But if I had to power rank teams right now, I would probably have the Liberty at 1, the Lynx at 2, and then probably the Ace at 3, Sun 4. I still would not put the Sun ahead of the Aces. The Aces still beat them every time in the head-to-head. But if I had to go for the power ranking right now, the updated power ranking, Liberty 1, I think the Lynx have to be 2. The Lynx have been that good. Like, I can't dismiss them. And the one time they ended up losing recently to Indiana, Collier didn't play. And Collier's games, they haven't lost in about a month or even longer. So the point is, I think the Lynx are really, really just legit. And I think that they're a dangerous team. So keep an eye out for them. Point is that was kind of my takeaway for the games on Friday and Saturday. By the way, the time to get into the actual games for the Sunday card, but for that one, remember once again that we are brought to you by Underdog Fantasy, because they have a pick'em, which gives you a chance to win 1,000 times your entry. Or you can play fantasy football the right way with Best Ball. Best Ball Mania is now live with $50 million in prizes. You can have specials and boosts and all flex entries, and I'll probably end up doing something for an entry with the WNBA, as I'll get into the player aspect of it in a second. But keep an eye out. Probably going to do one of my favorite options there for my underdog entry. Sign the promo code NBSGPN to claim your special bet and a first-time deposit offer up to $1,000 bonus cash on a fantasy. Promo code NBASGPN. We're also brought to you by Circuit Survivor and Circuit Millions. Circuit Sports is back with Circuit Survivor and Circuit Millions. You won $16 million in guaranteed prizes. And a reminder that you should go to Vegas for Ultimate this weekend because, one, you have 1 day left. It is the final day, as it was from the 22nd to the 24th of August. But if you go, you can hang out with Ryan and Sean and enjoy some of the open bar events in the world of sportsbook. You can also use the promo code SGP15, save you 50% for your hotel room for sign-up weekend. A reminder, if you're going to be entering the contest, you have until September 7th to sign up, and you can use a proxy to play for anywhere once you sign up in person. If we deal with the proxy as well, go to proxythefootballcontest.com. We can save $50 with the promo code SGP, and you'll also get a free hat. Welcome back, everyone, to the WNBA Gambling Podcast. Just finished recapping what happened over the weekend. Time to get into the actual picks and preview for the 2 games on Sunday. So speaking of the Aces, they play the opening game. They play it around noon, and they're in Chicago, taking on the Sky. They're laying 7.5 here. The over-under is around 166.5. They face off 2 times this season. So far, a mixed bag. The road team has actually won both games. So home court advantage is really not existed in the head-to-head. You're looking at the most recent meeting, which was, I believe, right before the break, which was the Aces losing by 8 at home to the Sky. And you are looking at the first meeting with the Aces beating the Sky on the road by 12 in late June. Now, I said before, the Aces have not been good lately, as they have lost a decent amount of games recently. They have lost 4 of their last 5. So they have been kind of in shambles recently, losing to Chicago, losing to the Liberty, then beating the Sparks. Congrats, I guess. Then losing to the Lynx in back-to-back games. As for Chicago, they have been hovering, but mostly underwhelming. I can't really roast them too much, though, because they went into Connecticut and they almost won. Did end up losing in the end, but they were competitive. They lost by 2. Gave it all they had. Just didn't work out. But to go through the actual numbers here, the Sky have lost 3 of their last 4. So not exactly great form for them. I do think for the sake of this matchup, though, the real story is going to come down to, in my opinion, A'ja Wilson against this front court. Because I know A'ja Wilson is the best player in the league. I know Collier has been on a phenomenal run for the last week or 2, but A'ja is still clearly the best player. So the question is how she's going to match up, maybe rebounding-wise, against the likes of, for example, Angel Reese, and you're looking at Cardoso as well. So I think that for the sake of this matchup, A'ja should get whatever she wants in terms of points. The thing is, you're looking at Reese, and she's had back-to-back 20 rebound games. So if the Sky can actually do a good job on the glass, they can generate second chance points, and the Aces are still not a good defensive team, which should result in a decent amount of second chance points for the Sky, and maybe that's enough to cover in this game. Now, the last time they played, Kennedy Carter had 34 points. She was incredible, so she kind of dominated. Cardoso had 8 rebounds, and Reese only had 10. Reese had a double-double. She was a plus 26, but they did a pretty decent job containing her onto the glass. But the Sky shot 48.6% from the floor in that game. The Aces shot 47%. Real story, though, was the rebounding, as the Sky ended up out-rebounding the Aces 35-26. Now, that was also an issue that came up in the Lynx series that we just saw the back-to-back games, because the Aces got absolutely killed, especially in the second game, on the glass by Collier. Collier, to go through her numbers, had a career high in rebounds, and Asia got torched. Collier, 27 points on 11 of 15 shooting, and she also had 18 rebounds. Now, that's worth mentioning, because the Aces as an entire team had 17 rebounds. Collier had more rebounds by herself than the entire Aces roster combined. That's what happened. That's why they lost the game. Collier single-handedly destroyed this team, but the rebounding has been kind of a concern for the Aces recently, and we'll see if they address that against Angel Reese, who's the best rebounder in the entire league. Cardoso, I still don't think is a great rebounder for her size, so you just have to work on that. Then again, when Reese is taking down 15 rebounds a game, I guess you're not going to have many rebounds to work with. But I do think the Aces are going to have a hard time of actually containing this team on the glass, and maybe that's going to result in a close game. It's also in Chicago. That might play a factor, but on the other hand, you can look at the Aces losing games to the Liberty and losing games to the Lynx. This is a step down in competition. I think we all know that the Sky are significantly worse than the Lynx. So it is a pretty good get-right spot. A team like the Aces being annoyed after losing back-to-back games against one of the title contenders that they have had success against over the past couple years. Not so much this year, but now they have a chance to take a series lead against the Sky, a team that has not been in good form recently, and a team that really doesn't guard anybody. And I do think the Sky are going to struggle to contain the backcourt of the Aces. Now, I mentioned before, though, you were looking at an interesting dynamic for the actual minutes for the Aces, because Gray played 24 minutes, and you saw Hayes play 22. It did seem like Gray was getting benched for Hayes for a couple of minutes there, and I am wondering if that might be a potential lineup tweak moving forward. Is Chelsea Gray going to come off the bench at some point? I don't know. It's a possibility. Keep an eye out for that. For the game, though, Asia ended up having 24 and 7. She had a big third quarter in that game. Plum only had 11 points. Jack Young only had 12. Those two went a combined 7 of 21. That will not get it done for the game. And Hayes was good, though. She had 12 points off the bench. So for this matchup, the question is, do I think the Aces are going to show up defensively? Probably not. Do I think they'll show up offensively? Yes. I think that the Lynx are an elite defensive team. They've been viewed that way the entire season. And the Sky definitely are not that, as they give up 80-plus points to the Sun. And you can go down the line. Defensively, they are really not a good team. So first glance, I'm actually going to lean to the over in this game. I don't see much defense being played, and I do think that the Aces, after getting put in a box against the Lynx for the second game, I still think they can definitely generate a lot of points and a lot of easy opportunities based on how quickly they like to play. The Sky don't mind to play quickly either, so I think that you're going to see a bit of a high-scoring game between these teams, and I think that 166.5 is a bit low. The Aces, I think, can push 90 in this game. That wouldn't totally shock me. So if that's going to happen, I do think that a total in the 170s is pretty realistic for this matchup. But I think for the sake of the head-to-head, to go through the actual totals for the first two games this season, even though both teams did alternate wins, the first meeting did land 178, and the second meeting ended up also landing 178. So based on the totals this season being in the high 170s, I think 166.5 is way too low. That's my first glance. Give me the over. I think that this total's too low. Give me a total in the 170s. For the side, it really comes down to how much you want to trust the Aces or how much you want to trust the Sky, because they were competitive against the Sun. You know, the Sun are not a great team offensively, so that did allow the Sky to hang in there. But I do think the Aces will be out for blood, and they should be motivated. Becky Hammond should be really pissed at how this team's played for the last week or two. So I am going to go with the Aces. I'll lean that way at the 7.5. I think that they'll come out focused. I think that Gray is going to, once again, maybe have some interesting overall rotations with Hayes, but I think that Plum will play better. I think Young will play better, and I think that you're looking at Asia Wilson, who should dominate once again. Carter scored 34 in the last meeting. I don't see that happening again. Maybe she'll get to 20 again, so if you want to go for player props. But for the sake of this matchup, I'm going to go with the over, and I am going to go with the Aces. Mostly a lean, though, on the over. Moving on, though, to the player props for this matchup. So I mentioned a couple of them before, but to get into a bit of detail for the actual numbers. So for the props that I mentioned before, if you want to go for Carter points, for example, because we know how good she's been so far this season, and she had 34 in the last game. You can find her points being available at about 19.5. Now, she has gone under in 4 of the last 5, so I do think it's an interesting matchup because she has been trending under recently, and she's had less than 20 points in 3 straight. But in each meeting against the Aces this season, she has scored at least 20 points. In fact, she's averaging 27 points per game against the Aces so far this season. So it kind of comes down to what you want to actually pay attention to. If you want to go based on matchup, then take the over. If you want to go based on recent form, you can take the under. But if you like her rebounds, I don't mind that. Carter rebounds have actually been a pretty underrated prop. They're at 3.5. The over is minus 132 on FanDuel. She has gone over in both meetings against the Aces this season, as she ended up having at least 4 rebounds in both games. But she's had at least 4 rebounds in 4 straight, at least 4 rebounds in 7 of the last 9. Don't mind that prop as a pretty, I'd say, unique prop that's flying under the radar. I'll go with Carter over her 3.5 rebounds at minus 132. We know she plays a lot of minutes, and I do think there are going to be some chances for her to grab some boards. Now, looking at the actual numbers for the star players here, we'll start off with Asia, who we know got outplayed by Nafisa Collier twice last week. Her points are 26.5. I can't really argue with it. If you want to go for the rebounds, it's at 11.5 for her there. She has gone under this number for points, though, in 3 of the last 4. And she ended up going over, though, in each of the last 3 games against Chicago, including both games this season. So she's averaging 29 against, or 29.5 against the Sky this season. I don't mind Asia over. I think she'll be in line for a good game here. So I don't mind the over 26.5 points, especially for a team like the Aces that could use a nice get-right spot and a team that could definitely use a nice win to get back on track. The star player should definitely step up there. And we do know that Asia is really capable of dominating against Cardoso and against Reese, who have really not been a great defensive backcourt, defensive front court, together so far this season. So give me Asia in that one. Then you get to the interesting stuff, which is my thoughts on Chelsea Gray. Because Gray's points are at 7.5 now. That's how far she's fallen from Grace. So you got to wonder if there's value on the under. 7.5, I don't think I can take. That line's a bit low to me. If you wanted to consider an under, then I do think that you have some value if you think that she's going to be hovering around 22 minutes again. But that line's too low, and Gray still does love to shoot. So I'm going to pass on that. Reese rebounds, though, are 13.5. I can't take that. If you want to go over, go nuts, because she's had 20-plus in back-to-back games, but I can't do it. She's gone under in both games against the Aces of the season. I don't see much value. I can see a bounce-back game, though, for like Jackie Young, for example. But I think I covered basically all the props for this matchup. My main leans, though, are going to be on Asia points and on, I'll go Carter rebounds at 3.5 as my, I'd say, unique, sleeper play for this matchup. Either way, though, moving on to the next matchup. Before we get into that, though, I do want to talk about, once again, our sponsor, because we are brought to you by Rhythm, because Rhythm can let you create your own betting model for football. If you want to either make your own model or you could use the pre-made ones that Rhythm has for you. But a reminder that Rhythm is the #1 AI-powered sports betting platform that will provide bettors of all levels with the ability to build custom models in seconds to get predictions on betting the money line, spread, total, and props. You can build your own model, or you can copy one that's already made for you on Rhythm. And a reminder that Rhythm will give you predictions on every game and player props, and they also have a ton of stats, research, and trend analysis that can give you more betting insights. Simplify your betting process for college football for the rest of the season. And a reminder that you can use Rhythm as well for WNBA and golf. You can also build the model for those 2 sports, and you can also use it for any of the college football games coming up maybe on Thursday. If you want to talk about, for example, NC State and their matchup against Western Carolina, you can use Rhythm if you want some thoughts on that one. Point is, though, you can definitely use the I'd say 7-day free trial to give it an experimental trial and to see if you actually like the overall platform. Use the overall link, sportscampodcast.com/rhythm, sportscampodcast.com/rhythm to get 7 days off. So a reminder, sportscampodcast.com/RITHMM. We're also brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is an unauthorized ticket marketplace for the MLB, which makes getting tickets easier and faster. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down closer to the first pitch. So if you want to get some killer last-minute deals on prices, view some receipt, and the lowest price guarantee, Game Time does take the guesswork out of buying tickets. And a reminder that the immediate seat views feature is one of my favorite features because it lets you know the exact view you would be getting before you spend your money. So if you find a seat that you might like, you can see the view you would be getting, see if there's a poll or some type of obstruction that you might be unaware of, and that could definitely ruin your overall experience if you end up purchasing the ticket without using it. But that's a feature that other overall ticketing platforms don't have. Recommend using that before you spend your money. So use the emergency use feature, which is definitely my favorite feature on the entire platform. Either way, though, down the Game Time app, create an account, use code SGPN for $20 off. And a reminder, terms apply. Again, create an account, use code SGPN for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, down the Game Time app today. Let's make tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Welcome back, everyone, to the WNBA Gambling Podcast. Let's finish getting into the first game for the Sunday card. Time to move on to the late game. You have an awful matchup between the Sparks and the Wings. For this one, the Wings are laying 5.5, and the over-under in this game is at 167.5. The thoughts on this game are pretty simple, and they involve no words, so I'm going to get this done quickly. This is how I would describe the game. If you looked up toilet bowl in the dictionary, this would be the matchup that would pop up. These are two awful teams, probably the worst two teams in the entire league. You'd argue that Washington just beat the Sparks, so I think that Washington's actually higher than these teams on the power ranking system. But the point is, this matchup will be taking place at around 4 p.m. Eastern, and damn, this matchup looks disgusting. Now, the Wings this season are 6-22. The Sparks are 6-23. The Wings at home are 4-8. The Sparks on the road are 2-13. The Sparks have lost 6 straight, and the Wings have lost 3 straight. So these two teams are insanely terrible. Now, they faced off in July. This was in Dallas, and the Sparks actually won 87-81. Now, the Wings were competitive, though, in the most recent game, as they almost beat the Liberty. Now, Ionescu did not play, but they were able to keep the game close. Kind of got out of hand late, but the point is they did lose the game by 8. So the Wings were actually okay last time out. As for the Sparks, they ended up losing to the Aces by 16. Then they played the Sun, and they were competitive. They lost by 8. So we know that the Sparks are a mess. Ever since Brink got injured, they were bad beforehand, but they kind of found the new low once Brink was ruled out for the season. Then they lost to the Mystics, of course, by 6 in that game. I just have a hard time of picking really either team because this game's absolutely disgusting. I know according to Terrell and according to the toilet bowl rules, you should never lay points in the toilet bowl. Dallas, I do think is the better team if I had to go based on talent because at least they have a Reichel and they still have overall front court, I'd say, forwards that can rebound. And that's kind of the issue you run into with the Sparks because Hamby, points-wise, is kind of slowed down. But she's the only real option they have in the front court. And if you're looking at McCowan and you're looking at Satu and all the options they have a lot of size that I think the Sparks are going to have a hard time dealing with. And Arike, I know, has been very inefficient this season. She can go nuts, though, anytime. And I do question the defense for the Sparks in general. I think if I had to actually go for a side here, I think I have to lean to the Wings. At 5.5, I know it's disgusting because I hate this team, and I've made a lot of money blindly fading this team. They have won one out of the 3 games. The Sparks have done well. They've actually won the last 2 meetings. They have in Dallas in July. Sparks won by 6. Faced off in June in LA. The Sparks won by 9. Faced off first meeting this year in May, and the Wings won on the road by 1. But I do think that rebounding is going to be the story of the matchup. And I think that McCown, after a temper tantrum in the first half against the Liberty, she ended up coming back into the game, and she looked very good in the second half. Satu was fine. I thought that Arike made some shots down the stretch, but the Sparks do nothing that really excite me. And I think that the Wings have a bit more talent, so I'm going to lean to the Wings here. Tough to find an angle that I want to lock in immediately because these teams suck, and I think we all know that. So I'll focus on some props, but I do think Satu and McCown are going to be a lot for the Sparks front court to handle. And Hamby's been fine recently, but not as dominant as she was earlier in the year. And I think that they're going to need contributions from Rakia. They're going to need some contributions from some other players to step up, like Azare, for example. If they have good games, maybe they can get the job done and maybe even win the game outright. But I think Satu will play well, and I think that Arike will be able to do enough to definitely help the Wings score against this bad defense. I'm going to go with the Wings here. I don't feel great about it, but I'm going to just trust my instincts here, and I am going to go with Dallas in the spot. For the total, though, at 167.5, got to look at the actual numbers in the head-to-head because the first meeting went over, and the third meeting went over. The first meeting ended up landing 167. The last meeting ended up landing 168, and the middle game ended up landing 153. Now, the Sparks recently have been struggling offensively. They have scored less than 75 points in 3 straight. As for the Wings, they've actually been good offensively, as they ended up struggling against the Liberty. That's fine. They're a top team in the league. Scored 91 against Connecticut, scored 101 against Indiana, scored 81 against the Sparks. They've been better offensively. So I think for this one, I am going to lean to the under, mostly because I'm expecting the Sparks to kind of drag the total down themselves. I think that offensively they got problems, and I think that the Wings, with their size, should be able to limit the second chance points for the Sparks. So maybe a Sparks team total under, if you want to consider that angle, but I think I'll lean under in this game. Once again, a toilet bowl of all toilet bowls. Really don't want to bet this game that much at all because damn, these teams suck. But I think for the sake of this one, I'll lean to the under, and I'll lean to the Wings in this one. Either way, that'll get into the actual props for this matchup. I mentioned before Satu rebounds, and this is tricky because I did give out her rebounds on YouTube under in that last game against the Liberty. I had the under 7.5. She had 7 with 9.5 minutes left in the fourth quarter, and she finished with 7. She's had less than 8 rebounds in 9 of the last 10, and she's had less than 8 rebounds in 17 of the last 20 games. So she's been really underwhelming when it comes to rebounding, but she's had 11 plus rebounds in 3 of the last 4 games against the Sparks. I think I have to lean to the over on the rebounds here. I just see a ton of opportunity for McCowan and for Satu to just stockpile rebounds. So I'm going to go with the over on Satu rebounds here based on the head-to-head. I know recently the numbers have been supporting the under for her, but the Sparks really don't have anybody besides Hamby to rebound, and I think that Sabally is in a good spot to get back on track rebounding-wise. So I don't mind her overs for that. If I was looking at, for example, McCowan, by comparison, her rebounds are at 6.5, which I think is insanely low. Now, I understand McCowan has had some minute issues, and I know that she had a mental breakdown basically in the first half against the Liberty. Did have 8 rebounds in just 18 minutes in that game. The issue is the minutes, because she has played less than 23 minutes in 4 of the last 5 games. So that is kind of the issue you run into, which is how much is she going to play? She has had less than 7 rebounds in 3 of the last 4 games, but it is a good matchup for her. So, I mean, she had 6 rebounds against the Sparks last meeting in just 16.8 minutes. So if she plays like 20, she should fly over. But I don't know how much they're going to use her. That's kind of the problem. So McCown's in a tricky spot. If you want to go for her points, by the way, she's at 10.5. She has gone under this number in 3 of the last 4 games against the Sparks, but she has gone over this points number in 2 of the last 3. McCown has just been a thorn in my side the entire year because we know that if the actual playing time is there, she's in a good situation, but the playing time's never there because they don't really seem to like her with the coaching staff. So it's a really difficult spot. I think I prefer the Satu game. I think Satu is definitely a situation where she is still getting herself back into the swing of things with the WNBA. And with her rebounds being underwhelming recently, if McCown's minutes are going to continue to be around 20, then Satu has got a great opportunity to go for like 10. I think 10 rebounds for Satu is realistic if McCown is going to keep the same, I'd say, minimal number of minutes that she's been getting recently. So I'm going to lean to Satu over, and I think for McCown, I'm going to stay away. It is a good matchup for her. I'm aware of it, but I don't trust the coaching staff to give her the minutes that she needs to have a great game. So I am going to go with Satu rebounds, but I am going to stay away from McCown. I think that she can go over, but I don't know if I trust it enough to go through. Some other props I might be interested in, though. I have to look at something for Arike, just based on the minutes that she plays. I don't mind Natasha Howard rebounds, though, if I was going to pivot off of it. So, for example, if I am going to focus on Satu rebounds and I am going to stay away from McCown, I have to at least mention Natasha Howard, because Howard's been playing a lot of minutes and she's been pretty good recently, and her rebounds are at 7.5. Now, for her rebounds, it's at minus 106 towards the over. For the recent games, she has had at least 8 rebounds in 3 straight. Against the Sparks, she has had at least 12 rebounds in 2 of the last 4. Had 7 in the last game. She played 36 minutes. So if I had to go for a rebound over that I do like, it's actually going to be Natasha Howard. And I do think that if they're going to be going a bit smaller, maybe benching McCown, trying to use Satu at the center, and trying to use Howard at the power forward, maybe that could be the option they go with for that lineup. I think Howard's going to play a lot of minutes, but you're looking at how she's played recently. She's done well rebounding-wise, having 7+ in 5 straight, 8+ in 3 straight, and she's played at least 34 minutes in 3 of the last 5 games, at least 32 minutes in, doing the math here, in 5 of the last 6. I think Howard rebounds I actually do like quite a bit. I think her rebounds, I think she's got a shot to get to like 9 or 10 for this one. So give me Howard rebounds over if I had to go for one front court member that I'm going to go with for the Wings. I do want to look at Arike, though. I'm going to go through her numbers for her props. So Arike, as a lot of you know, I've roasted the entire year because she's shooting 36%. She's an extremely inefficient shooter, but I have to mention the rebounds for her because her numbers is 4.5, and she's done well recently. Now, for the points, it's at 20.5. She's gone under this number in a decent amount of games against the Sparks recently, as she has had less than 21 points in 5 of the last 7 meetings, going to 2 of the 3 meetings this season. Now, for the recent games in general, she has had a less than 20 points in 6 of the last 7. So if you think that she's going to go over, then you kind of need her to get hot from 3, or the volume will be there. But I do think that she just has not been very good. And you're looking at the efficiency numbers. She was 7 of 18 against the Liberty, 5 of 13 against the Liberty, 6 of 12 against the Sun. Only 12 shots, though, kind of an anomaly there. 8 for 21 against Indiana. She was 2 of 15 against the Sparks in the last meeting. She was a mess in that game. So the volume should be there for shot attempts. By the way, this is disgusting. She had 15 shot attempts in the last game against the Sparks. She ended up making 2 shots. The game before that, she was 10 of 28. Game before that, 7 of 30. Pass the damn ball, man. Like, what do you... I just can't handle those terrible shooting numbers. But Arike should get volume. If you think she shoots well, take the over. If you want to back history, lean to the under. I'm going to stay away. I can't take her because I think that she chucks up a lot of bricks. So I'm going to stay away, but I'm rooting for you, Burns, if you want to go for Arike 20+. I just can't do it. The Sparks have done a great job defending her in the past, so I'm going to stay away and look elsewhere. But for my favorite props in this matchup, I think I am actually going to go with Howard rebounds and Satu rebounds. I think it's a good matchup for both of them. So give me those two for my Wings props. For the other options, I didn't see much. Thought about Rakia. Has not done well against this team. Azure under her points actually might have some value at 10.5. She's gone under her points number at 10.5 in 7 of the last 10. Gone under in 4 of the last 5. And against the Wings, she has done well though. Gone over in each of the last 2 games. But I think I'd lean under for Azure. Probably not going to bet it. Kind of went through a lot of the props, but I think I'm going to stick with the rebounding numbers for the Wings in this one. As for the side, lean to the Wings, and I will lean to the under in this game. That's going to wrap it up, though, for the 2 games on the Sunday card. Now it's time for the lock and dog picks. Starting off with the lock on the show. Think I am going to go to the total that I talked about in the first game. I am going to go with the over 166.5 in the Aces and the Sky game. So I think for the sake of this matchup, I got to at least acknowledge how bad the defense has been for both teams and at least acknowledge the head-to-head history for these teams because the first 2 meetings flew over. First 2 meetings, it landed in the 170s, and the best part of it is that both teams won a game. So it wasn't even like there was one uniform script. There was one script needed for the Aces and a separate script needed for the Sky. The pace was the same. Both games landed exactly at 178, and each team won the game. So I do like the idea of each team getting to 80+. We saw the losing team in the first game get to 83. Saw the losing team in the second game get to 85. These teams love to run. I see a lot of pace. The Aces have not been good defensively, and offensively we know that they have a lot of overall weapons, averaging 87.3 points per game. Give me the over in this game. I see a lot of points, borderline track meet, and I think this line is too short. So give me the over as my lock in this one. For the dog, I think I am going to go with an alt line for a player prop. The question is, what line do I want? I think it's going to be a rebounding number for either the Wings or for the... do I want to go for Satu or do I want to go for Howard? It's tricky because Satu's been so bad at rebounding lately. So I kind of have to at least consider going for I got to think of what I want to do here. I think for the sake of her performance recently and for the sake of her overall numbers, historically speaking, against the Sparks, I think I am actually going to go to Satu in this one. She's just been that good against this particular team. I could get her rebounds at over 9.5 at plus 310. I think that's pretty appealing. I want to see what price I can get, though, on Howard. Whichever price is higher, I'll take as my dog for the show. So for Howard's rebounds, her 9.5 rebounds is at plus 270. So I guess I'm going with Satu. All right, so hopefully Satu rebounds for once in this game. But Satu over 9.5 rebounds in this one is about plus 310, which I think has some value. She has been rebounding well against the Sparks in the past, and it's a great opportunity for her to go over this number against a bad rebounding team. But you're looking at her rebounds, and historically speaking, against the Sparks, she's had at least 11 rebounds in 3 of the last 4 games. I think it's a good spot. Now, she has been playing a bunch of minutes, as she ended up playing against the Liberty 36 minutes in both games. So they've not eased her back post-Olympics. She's playing a bunch of minutes. They're favored in the game. She should be on the court all the time. And assuming that McCown's not going to play many minutes because the coaching staff hates her, it's a good spot for her to get there. But 11-plus rebounds in 3 of the last 4 head-to-head meetings, and you can get it at 10 rebounds at plus 310. I like the value. Give me that as my dog. Now, for the underdog options, for this matchup, or for the overall card in general. For underdog, I think I'm going to stick with the options I mentioned before. I'm going to go with Asia higher on her points at 26.5. I'll go with Satu higher on her rebounds at 7.5 for consistency. And I think for this one, I am going to also go with, you know what, I'll go with Carter rebounds. I mentioned it before. I did like that option quite a bit. Give me Carter higher, 3.5 rebounds at about, once again, a pretty decent option there as my last choice. That's going to wrap it up, though. That is my underdog entry. And that's going to wrap it up for this episode. Reminder, back once again with Terrell and I, probably on Sunday night for the Monday card. Until next time, you can find me on Twitter at Reichel Radio. Find me on the NBA show, the tennis show as well. Gonna have a couple episodes coming up for the U.S. Open. So you want some tennis thoughts, go into the women's episode and the men's episode for the preview and the outrights. Fresh off of hitting a 29-1 shot, by the way, in tennis. Other than that, though, you can find me on the MLB show as well on Sunday for the Monday games. Until next time, though, good luck to all of you and all of your bets. Bye, everyone.